Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Salma Avdic with the American Marketing Association, and I will be your moderator for today's webcast, which is in partnership with Mintent and is titled Level Up in 2018 with a Documented Content Strategy. So before we get started, I just wanted to go through some quick housekeeping items. So this session is being recorded and will be made available later on this afternoon. We also encourage everyone to continue this conversation on Twitter, and you can do so by referencing #Mintent when tweeting about this webcast. And if you have any technical or content-related questions, please feel free to submit them at any time. You can use our chat area that's located on the left-hand side of your screen. All right, with that, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today. So we have Kelly Hungerford with us, and a little bit about Kelly. So she works with marketing directors and general managers on the planning and implementation of European marketing platforms and initiatives. So she is a native to California, but she currently lives in Switzerland, which sounds wonderful, and she is a marketing strategist and consultant, and so she works with European brands on contracts, leading digital transformation initiatives, programs, and projects across the EMEA region. She also is the founder of Community Works, Drop-in Digital, and Women in Digital Switzerland. We also have Matt Dion with us, and he's the CEO of Mintent. And Matt has a career spanning 25 plus years. So he's considered a consummate thought leader in the areas of digital marketing, agile marketing, content marketing, customer-driven experiences, brand building, and business development. Matt is also a sought-after speaker. He's presented at Adobe Summit, Enterprise World, Digital Entertainment World, Luxury Interactive, Digital Hollywood, and others. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt to get us started.
Great. Thank you very much, Selma, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We have another large crowd, so there's lots of interest in this topic, which is how do you do a documented content strategy? So, this is, for those of you who have joined our webinars in the past, you know that we try and bring experts from wherever they are in the world and help marketers with the problems that they're struggling with the most. And today's no exception. The problem we're going to address today is what we're calling the big, hairy content problem. And the problem goes like this. First of all marketing efforts depend on good content. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. We don't need to beat that horse to death. What's surprising is how much we're spending on that. Gartner has said we're spending 45% of our budgets producing content, and that's a huge number. And when you survey marketers about if they're happy with it, only one out of 10% are actually happy, and so that's stressing a lot of people out. And so today we want to, brought Kelly here to address this problem, and hopefully we can move closer towards being one of those 10% that are not as stressed. Now here's a little a stat that I keep seeing over and over again, and I think is telling, and I think gets to the heart of some of this problem that we're having. Only 37% have a documented content strategy. And that's, if you look at the breakdown of that, so it's 37% say, yeah, we have a strategy and it's documented. Now we'll get into different ways of documenting and how effective that is. But 38% have a strategy, but it's not documented. So I'm curious about that segment because I don't know, without having something, I don't know where the strategy lives and how effective that can be. But then there's 19% that are planning to create one within 12 months, which is great. The funny one is the 6% that have no strategy and no plans to have one. So I thought that was kind of funny. Maybe that's where we all want to work, is companies that just, woohoo, let's just do stuff and see how it goes. But I think most of us don't live in that world. So for everybody else that has a documented strategy or is working on one or plans to work on one, today's webcast is for you. Now, is it important to have a documented content strategy. And we'll explain what that is, what that means. But this concept, is it even valuable to spend our time doing? So some of our friends from the content marketing world, Ian Cleary, super smart guy, saying, you can see the quote here, the difference between succeeding and failing is to have a plan, revisit it periodically, and adapt it based on data. You'll be more successful than 2/3 of your peers. And Joe Paluzzi, the founder of the Content Marketing Institute, who works with thousands and thousands of content marketers, says marketers who write their strategy down are 4 times more successful than those who don't. So I have some other stats here from our customers that we surveyed. And just to explain what a content marketing platform is, or actually the dirty word behind a documented content strategy. I think one of the reasons people don't have one is because that word kind of scares a lot of people. Documented. It's a loaded term. A lot of people think about reams and reams of pages that they have to write, and maybe putting this in a Word doc or a PowerPoint. And I would say, those are useful tools, but oftentimes that's where documented strategies or any other thing goes to die, goes to the marketing graveyard, never to be seen again. But it doesn't have to be a dirty word. There are platforms out there, and we're one of them, a content marketing platform, where you put your strategy into a web-based platform so that your entire team, you put your strategy, you work on the strategy, you put it in there. Everybody that's working on the content or needs the content is on the same platform. You collaboratively create content, distribute it, measure it, everything in one spot. So when customers use a content marketing platform like Mintent or many others, they by default have a documented content strategy if they're using the platform properly. And so when we ask our customers what kind of benefits you get, it's the same type of thing. There's an increase in sales accepted leads, an improvement in the effectiveness of the content. They get more content produced, and they reduce the cost. So these are, again, just some more anecdotal data. So I hope that we've convinced you that it is important to have a documented content strategy. And so with that, we've invited Kelly. I call her the International Woman of Mystery, an American living in Switzerland. And every time I talk to her, she's doing something cool like skiing in the Alps or working with some really cool customers. So she works with customers all over the world, small companies, big companies, and she helps them with their strategies and helps them document those strategies. And so I've seen Kelly speak a few times, has a wealth of information on this topic, very passionate marketer, very passionate about customer experience. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Kelly.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. And Matt, you're right. I am very, very passionate about strategy and really about how technology can help us be more effective and more efficient content strategists. So what I'd like to do is really talk about a few things that I've learned working with many clients, and I kind of call them the 7 unsung heroes of a sound content strategy. And I think if we think about it, there are a lot of fantastic resources out there for getting started with our content strategy. Content Marketing Institute, we know them well. There are some really amazing blog posts. Jody Harris just wrote one last week if you're looking for a foundational. It's definitely worth looking into, and there are some other resources that I like to reference also, and I think that's always the easy part, is kind of finding that information, but the hard part is bringing it to life. And with working with clients, I found that we need one of the biggest questions that comes is like, but how do I get started? I get what the elements are, and I get what the essential components are, but what really makes it tick? So I thought about that, and these are seven things that time over time they surface, and they're areas that I found on projects are really their success factors, or they help lead to failure. So I wanted to quickly go through them today with you to kind of highlight them. And I think they're relevant whether you're working on a large distributed project with all different types of actors who are helping contribute to your strategy, or if you're working in a really small team. These tips are really what I find help move it forward. So yeah, let's move forward from there. I think one of the first things before we get even into the content mission and the framework, and before we get started with strategy, and you're going to hear this a lot, but is the why. We really need to start with the why. And if we look back to the numbers that Matt presented before and the statistics of success or failure or documenting or saving money, if we don't understand the why we want to create the content, we already have problems. And it's really about getting that team together and understanding, is it lead generation you're looking for? Is it building brand awareness? Is it being helpful? Is it customer service? And this is really important because as we start to move through the strategy and those foundational essentials, it always comes back to, and the question always pops up like, oh, this is an amazing piece of content, but why actually are we creating it? And we're going to talk a little bit more about where this ties in, but I would say, like Simon Sinek does, start with the why. Find your why. And it really helps to not just think about the why, but literally take a pen and write it down and stick it to a wall. After we find the why, I really like to reinforce, move to the how. And a lot of times we really start with the how first, like, we have so many great ideas and this is how we're gonna move into it. But I think the how really needs to come after the why, and those are kind of two of the essentials that we need to keep top of mind before we move into some success factors and building out that strategy. And Matt, you might find that also working with clients and also with software. I mean, either way, you got to have the how and the why.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Matt Heinz put something out this morning I was reading. He said the objectives are the why, the strategy is the what, and the tactics are the how. So he's got it broken down nicely. But the point is, definitely start at the strategic end. Start at the top. Start with why you're doing it, and then everything else will flow from there.
Exactly. So then, if I go into my 7 unsung heroes, one of the biggest heroes, and admittedly, I only started using this about, I don't know, I'd say a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, and it's really helped me in working with teams. And that unsung hero is a content mission. And a content mission is really new for a lot of people. I borrowed this from Andy Crestodina at Orbit Media in Chicago, who writes some fantastic content on content strategy, and he's very passionate about the mission. And he says that, businesses have mission and vision statements, and brands have positioning statements, and our content, it needs a mission statement also. And it really describes the content and what we're going to offer and how it's going to be helpful. So it's not really the individual goal of each individual piece of content and how that works in the funnel, but overall, when people come to our website, how are we going to help them? And he has a framework for this. It's very, very simple. It's only 4 small lines. And I can say that when I work with teams, this can take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to really figure out what this framework means and what our content mission is. So it's important, and it's also an amazing team building exercise. So I highly recommend it. We'll talk about that a little bit down the road, but this really helps. It's kind of our Northern Star. And I can show you what that looks like. For an oral care company that I'm working with here in Europe, we went through this exercise, and we don't know yet what the website's called. They're going through they're building new websites. So we started with the content mission, and the example was, their website wants to be the place where oral care specialists find educational and scientific resources on gum health to deliver better patient care. That seems really, really easy, right? And so that one took 2.5 hours. We had different people from different departments around the table. Everybody has a different idea of what we do, and that's actually the starting point, because if you can't come to this general understanding of what type of landing pad you want your website and your content hub to be, you're going to have a really difficult time also crafting those individual pieces of content. So grab a pencil, grab some lunch. It could take a while, but it's an amazing team building exercise there. So that's a real gem that.
Yeah, and I agree, Kelly, with this one. It does take time and can be a little painful, but it's totally worth it. That that's saying that people don't really, people do not want to be sold to. They just want information about the things they care about. And so, but we lose track of that, and we just start creating content, and sometimes it's self-serving or it's about us. And if you have the mission and it's about serving others or whatever it's about, it kind of keeps you on the right track. So I think that's really very valuable.
Well, exactly, and I think it's something also that people are pretty proud. It's kind of like when you go into a company, you see the mission statement and the values, often framed posters on the walls. That content mission can be right there next to it as well. And it might sound like, really? Would you do that? Absolutely, and here's why. Because when you're working with agencies, with writers, with teams, if everybody has that mission in front of their eyes, it helps everybody come around the table at the same point. And I think this is also very important when we're thinking about how we pass our content or our briefs to people. How do we brief them? Everybody needs to be on the same page. So not enough just to talk about the type of content. You need to talk about the bigger purpose and how that fits into your website as well and what you want to be known for. So another gem that I think is really important and is an absolute unsung hero is team alignment and really not only identifying your key players, but bringing them in to make a team and breaking down those silos. And by having the entire team around the table understanding what you're doing, it's going to help your success long term. And interestingly enough, and I was talking to Matt about this before, and Megan, was very often the people writing the content are the people who are furthest away from the customers. The people closest to your customers are very often customer care. It could be your sales team. It could be your CEO who's out talking to people and gets a different perspective. But very often the writers themselves, they just don't have any of that contact with customers. So to be successful, you need to kind of have this big group hug and bring everybody in, from the CEO to HR to the sales force. Let everybody know what you're doing and have them be a part of your creative process too. And there really is a role for everybody. You'll read about that in strategy and how to create the right types of content. They often talk about bringing in your subject matter experts. It's really beneficial if they know ahead of time what you're doing and not just when you go out and need them. I think the more transparency,
No, I was just going to add, sorry, that one thing that we're always working on with our customers when they first implement some kind of a system to do this is the workflows, and who's doing what and when are they doing it, and how do you have to identify all those people up front, and then you have to make sure that you know where they fit in. When are they going to get something and how much of it and that type of thing. So yeah, I think identifying. Because sometimes when we start and you put a workflow together for each piece of content, then you're scrambling to go, who should really be involved when? So it's good to get all your key players identified up front, understand their role, etc.
Well, exactly, and also, Brian, if I think about if you have a team and maybe not everybody has the skills they need yet, and if you've already had a meeting, for some teams we even have a presentation. We talk about content strategy, like what this new initiative is, how we're going to be marketing with content and what it means for the organization in many different ways, in PR, for search, for lead generation. So we go through an entire company presentation because it's a really important part of the strategy, and it shouldn't be hidden away. And by doing that, you really sensitize everybody, the key stakeholders within different departments, to what's happening so they know. And also, a lot of times people don't think about this, but your team might need training. If human resources is on board with what you need, they might be a lot more likely to help support you so you can be successful. So it's really something we don't think about very often, but bringing people in as early as possible, not even for the subject matter expertise, but as key stakeholders for visibility, it's a huge part of the success factor, I think. One way that we create this transparency, or that I like to, is taking that old, kind of a new spin on the war room. And the war room is probably not the best term, but it kind of, I don't know, seems to resonate. Everybody knows what it is. But I think this is especially helpful, and I've seen this work really well with clients who are maybe not yet veterans with content strategy or using content to market, or with teams who have different departments. It's not a small team, so they have many different people working on content. If you can have a dedicated place to use as your central operating hub, and you can have Post-its on the walls, and this is especially interesting when you start working with personas and developing and journeys. If you can keep them up on the wall, that makes a huge difference. It's really this meeting place where when teams come around, they have the mindset when they walk in the room, and they know exactly what they're doing. And it also allows you not to go back to this black box. Once you've created a document, and I think that goes back to your point, Matt, like this, why aren't more strategies documented? Because it's kind of a hassle. And then once you document that, it gets in that Word document. Where does it sit? On a file server, right? So we need a way to bring it to life, and this is kind of the first step.
Absolutely. The War Room is great, and it certainly gets people excited. It's team building. You can't beat face-to-face, no matter what. I mean, technology and email and all this stuff, but face-to-face is fantastic. But, you can't meet like that every single day. So it's like, how do we create that, collaboration and that excitement and that visibility and all that energy that comes out of a war room? How do we it certainly doesn't get absorbed into a Word doc that gets printed out or it's left on a file server. But if you can make that come to life, and I think that's the challenge, is what online technology can we use to kind of keep that war room idea going all the time?
Yeah, I think so, and that's where, I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but that's where I truly see content marketing platforms helping the organization, helping the teams, and supporting the documented strategy, because if we're leaving strategy to the literal, digital ink documents, we have a problem moving forward. There are too many people involved today with content creation, good content creation, and there are better ways. And this is just an excellent example of where technology can help business and can help a lot of the problems that we see with efficiencies and workflow, permissions, sign-off, asset management. And it's a really good point. This is one place that technology really shines. And I think it's something that probably people didn't, and marketers and communication professionals might not, even IT, might not have seen it coming, is definitely in the creation process, not of creating the asset itself, but the entire value chain of what it means to document and bring that content strategy to life.
Yeah, and another thing, and I normally we do questions at the end, but a couple came in that made me think we should address this now while we're on the war room. Mm-hmm. It's about what is content. What's your content strategy? It's just like really creating a new website, and the whole idea is that content is everything. It's what your people say. It's every channel that you have. It's your website. It's your social. It's all, it's anything you're producing, and so it really isn't just a marketing endeavor. Marketing often leads the charge there, but it involves people from all across the organization. And so that's why this is becoming so important, that we really deal with this very strategically, get many people involved in these concepts like war rooms. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there to address a couple of the early questions.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think like to Mandy's point, like what do you consider content? Is it the entire website? Content is any asset that can power another digital entity. So it's not just we use content, we think, okay, we use it in terms of top of the funnel for search maybe, but content and the content you use to market can be found in many different places. So I think it's something to consider. Again, it's like, why are we creating this? How are we going to create it? Where is it going to be used? And we get into that a little bit of where this goes. And again, if you can tie it together, it's hard to keep all those pieces, like there's a lot of moving pieces, and you got to glue them together, and that's where technology can really help. Yeah. And there are some great questions here, so I definitely want to get to these. Let's move. I'm having fun reading them. Okay, I'm going to move on. So war room is very important. And it's like I could just stay on the questions part. So in the war room, we found, or the creative room, or whatever you want to call it, and just by the way, there are usually some very kind of dusty corners of offices and buildings that aren't used, and just go straight to the human resources and ask if you can dominate that corner. They'll probably be happy to see it utilized. these rooms are great for the persona creation. And I think if there's one piece that comes across in anyone that you talk to when it comes to content strategy, it's who are you targeting? Who is the audience? And who is your persona? And I find, and I don't know what you find with clients as you help them, Matt, but more and more people kind of know who they're going to target, but they're really targeting more of a segment than they are an actual persona or this fictitious person who really represents who you want to draw in. And they just don't know how to either get started with them or what the value is going to be or maybe how to keep them going, right? So I mean,
there's a lot of problem. It's I mean, there's a lot of conversation around personas and should we, shouldn't we, and are we doing them right? We've actually got Del Ravella coming on the next webinar, March 2nd. She literally wrote the book on buyer personas. It's actually a book called Buyer Personas, and she has buyerpersona.com. And so she's going to dive into this super deep, and we'll touch on it here. But yeah, I think having the persona is the first step. I think what goes hand in glove with that is the buyer journey, because the persona says, okay, this is who we're going to target, and then the journey is really about what does that person need in that instance. It gives you the context of what they need so that you can produce a piece of content that helps them. And so those two things really go hand in glove. And we'll, like I said, the next webinar will address this. But I know, Kelly, you've got a lot of experience working with companies on their persona.
No, it's amazing. Adele is amazing, and I bow to her. She's great. So I highly recommend that webinar coming up, and I think I'll jump on that myself because I'm always picking up tips and that I can carry to clients, and it's very helpful. And I think the one thing about personas that we don't think about, and this is why this common place to work, this creative room or war room is so important, is you really you need involvement from many different people to get this persona kick-started. And really it's to understand from different perspectives. If you ask your sales, a sales field representative, customer success manager, one of your marketing colleagues, your CEO, your product manager, who the target audience was, a specific, if it's B2B or B2C or professional or what have you, everybody would come up with probably, very highly likely, a different idea of who they're targeting. And that's kind of one of the I guess, common problems we come around and that we hit. And really by bringing everyone together to talk about personas and create the personas together, bring all of the data you have and start working on what's common, really helps come up with, let's say, a kind of a corporate or a standardized persona that everyone can work with. And it's very important. You need to really define, it sounds like basics, but you actually have to define, like, who is our target audience? And it takes everybody to do that. This is an exercise that we just did last year for a client in healthcare, and we brought all of the 7 subsidiaries together. If you don't have the resources to bring the entire subsidiary to you, you have resources and tools that can do that, such as Microsoft Teams has amazing video capabilities now, or Blue Jeans is a video hangout. You can do this virtually too if you need to. I think it's just a matter of getting people's input, and it's that bonding and really understanding what makes this target audience or this person important to us, and getting that common understanding. And then, like you said, Matt, once you get your persona down, and Adele's going to do an amazing job of walking through this, what's really important is not just knowing who this person is, but it's about understanding what their buyer journey is. And you need to keep those two linked. And I think this is where we start getting into a lot of moving parts, and people take the time to gather the information, and that's on one sheet and it's on the wall, and then you have your buyer journey on another sheet, and that's really bringing it alive, right? Like your buyer journey is, how are these people connecting with your brand? What are they doing every day so you can become like a plot point in their bigger story, in their narrative? And it's really at this point, I see a lot of teams start to kind of lose the plot themselves of like, gosh, we have a lot of different documents now. How do we manage those, right? And I think this is really where software comes in.
Yeah,
and
someone asked the question if my team's distributed, and most are, and also budgets and everything. So like you said, you've named some great tools for video collaboration. Really you can get, I would encourage people to use the online versions of Office and Google Docs and that kind of thing if they're going to go that route. But the content has to live in a certain place, and then you have to have a way to collaborate. And there's certainly lots of platforms out there like content marketing platform. And one of the concepts in here is a creative brief, where it's like, before you create the content, you should know why you're creating it. Whoever is in that workflow, the writer, the graphic designer, the ghostwriter, the subject matter expert, the approver, and make sure that it's, again, if you have the quarterly offsite, you define Tina and you've made a poster of Tina and Tina's sitting in a drawer, well then when the poor writer that's been assigned to write this ebook around flossing or whatever, that's going to be hard for them to remember what they talked about. Maybe they weren't even at that meeting. So here it is, right in front of you as you're creating the content. This is the person, and this is the stage of the journey and the kind of information they need. So it's just good to have this stuff front and center while you're creating all these different assets.
Well, you bring up a great point, and it's a true pain point. When you work with teams, and if you're part of that team and you know that you have to brief your agency or brief your freelancer or also help someone within the organization understand, if you have this in a central place, you kind of need that 360-degree view for the team that's working around the content to stay connected. And you also want, what you don't want to do, and what very often happens is you're all gung-ho in the beginning, and you start the persona journey and then get the buyer journey, and you've got this nailed, and we know it's Tina, and we're so excited. And then it's like 3 months down the road, nobody's pulling Tina out of the drawer anymore. It's like the personas need to come alive, and they need to work with the journey, and then they need to work with content formats. And Excel, it scales to a certain amount of time, and then you just can't, it's difficult to manage all of it because the dots aren't connected. And it becomes very discouraging for the team, or can be, especially if you're working distributed. So the software really helps bring that team together.
It's funny when personas, in the early days of personas, when people would create those life-size cardboard cutouts of the persona, and that is a cool idea. But the reality is, if you have multiple personas, and then you have them, their context changing as they go through a journey, that large cutout doesn't necessarily make sense, and it's hard for remote employees and stuff like that. So you need to look for other ways to make the persona feel real.
Absolutely. Well, unless it's like, your tennis persona and it's Roger Federer, or your Nespresso and it's George Clooney. Sorry. Because that might be fun to have them in the office hanging out with you. I don't know. Then maybe you want that to cut out. No. But okay. So bringing that to life is important. If you can use a software to help you, it's going to make life that much easier for your team and that customer experience internally. So to get the machine rolling. If you can't, we know that there are the standard tools we all work with. They do work. It just depends on how much content you're producing. And again, I think one of the beauties of being able to put some technology to help us and ease some of the pain points is we don't want to focus on, I guess, how much we're producing in terms of we need to continuously pump that out. We also want to keep in mind we just want to produce the right amount of really good quality content, and we need to be able to audit that content. We need to be able to also just be able to have an overview of that content. And again, it can get a bit hairy. These are the pain points that a lot of teams don't yet have mastered when it comes to juggling some documents. And that's especially true, or more so true, when we have to start thinking about, so it's not only the persona, it's not only the buyer journey, but then we need to start thinking about where does this fit in the funnel, right? Like what's our awareness content, and then it's moving on over to consideration, and then we purchased, and it's retention, and it's advocacy, and it all starts to get a little bit tedious, and this content has to be tied into the buyer journey, right? And then you get these different types of content, and it all starts getting even piling on a little bit more. You know, it's your assets, it's your infographics, it's your video, it's your audio, and it starts becoming a little bit, a little bit confusing, I'd say. This is the point where I think we as marketers need to really think about the type of content, not about more, but about better, and just really solid quality pieces so we don't get overwhelmed. And I think that the future is about the quality and not the quantity. We hear that, but it's really important to understand, and we have to be able to map that somewhere. Right now, most of the clients I work with as they're getting started, and I'm not sure if it's the right way to go or not. I think now that there are tools that can help us, technology, it might be a smarter way, but very typical on the left-hand side of the screen is a very typical mapping of the type of content we have and where it fits into the funnel. And then next to that is another spreadsheet of here's our marketing calendar for Europe. Let's say, you know, it's a pan-European campaign, and we have a lot of different product campaigns, and we have different brand campaigns, and we're targeting a certain persona at this part of the journey. And this is where it becomes difficult, and this is where I truly see that content marketing platforms can make a huge difference, because you can aggregate this into a calendar, and you have workflow, and it all ties back.
Yeah, I've seen some nasty, complex spreadsheets in my day, and it definitely doesn't have to be that way. So,
yeah, it's tough. It's tough, right? So, I think that if we're talking about assets, and this goes back to what is an asset and what goes into content strategy, you have to tie this all back to. This leads to the question of where do we store all of this? So it's usually stored on individual file servers. Maybe people are using Office 365. It could go into OneDrive there, or there is some creative. But what you really need is a digital asset manager. And I think that was one of the things that I love about the platform and your platform and content marketing platforms in general, is that you have that digital asset manager to help. And you need that. You need to stay organized.
When we're spending this much money on content, it really is an asset. It really is. And, the other interesting thing is about reuse. I wrote a blog post on this a while back, because unless you're a brand new company or you're just going digital for the first time, then when you map out all the content you need, that may in fact become your sort of to-do list of content to create. But very quickly you're going to find that you start building up a library of assets. But yet people, when they I need a piece of content that serves this purpose for this channel, whatever, oftentimes they sit down and create it from scratch, because finding it is difficult. And if a person needs something at a single point in time, it doesn't matter if you just published that a week ago or if it's a year old. If it's valuable information, it's valuable information is the bottom line. And so you really, as you're producing content, it has to be tagged, it has to be stored, it has to be accessible, it has to be easily reused. And so this is a very important part of any platform that you're going to use, is where you're keeping all those documents. Can everybody access them and find them easily? So, that's just a really, really important piece.
I think, and I think you're right. And I think that if we go back to, when we talk about the results of documented content strategies and how we're improving effectiveness, I think if we think about cost reduction, I think you brought up a really good point. We spend a lot of money on creating content, and very often when you talk to marketers and you talk about the assets that they have, a lot of times they know that they created something, they have no idea where it went, and so they recreate. So they're spending more money on lost content. A lot of times also we see that if content isn't stored in one area, there's risk that they have to think about, or the brand managers have to think about, as in, oh my gosh, that right asset hasn't even been used. Who okayed this asset to go? This isn't the right image, right? But if it's all stored in various different areas, it's difficult to have any type of governance over that. And I think that in having all of your assets in one place and having the tags and having the permissions and the workflow associated, you just clear a lot of that out and you reduce the waste. because you're able to more easily find your assets, and it saves your team a lot of time. A lot of time. I mean, how many people spend time finding an asset on their, you get something from an agency and you keep it on your desktop or you store it somewhere in a folder. People very rarely, really upload that to the company's digital library or to SharePoint. It's just kind of like, and because why? It's not connected anywhere anyway. But here you have that central connection point. So I think it's a really, really important part.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that leads us to this sort of next dirty word, which is a scary word, which is audit. And I think it obvious reasons audit has a bad name because people think of getting audited by IRS or something like that, or if you have to go in and audit your content, you've never done it. That's and it is spread on people's laptops and at your agency and multiple versions of everything you've ever done. And that I would scream as well. I mean, I have screamed doing that before. But I think that what as you move more to these web-based systems, content marketing platforms and whatnot, is that you don't have to, the audit doesn't become a painful thing. Instead of thinking of them as audits, it's just, how do I continuously ask questions about my content? You should be able to say, okay, last month or last quarter or even next quarter, how much have we produced? How many blogs? How many emails? How many case studies? How many tweets? That type of thing. How much content have we produced and what type of content for each persona that we have, or which stage of the buying journey, or which channels, and that type of thing. And if your content is all in a platform, then it's very easy. As long as it's in the platform and tagged properly, you can ask it anything you want, and you can get that information easily. And again, this helps to keep costs down. It helps in the planning process. It helps allocate resources. It just it definitely moves you to less stress. And then, the last slide kind of before we answer some of these awesome questions is just everybody, talks about analytics. And it's very important because, again, we're spending 45% of our budgets producing content. So everybody wants to know, and most people want to know, is it performing? So when you do send an email, how often, how did it get opened? Did people respond to the call to action? And again, what's important is to tie the analytics back to the intent of why you're creating that content in the first place. What does success look like for this piece of content? So we have customers actually in their creative briefs where they've created fields that said, for this piece of content, success looks like this. This many blog subscribers, or this many leads, or this many whatever it is. And then they go back and actually put the analytics into those fields so that they can really start analyzing all of their content and campaigns and everything and seeing how they did. So it's very important that whatever system you're using has the ability to measure the content, measure the results of it after you send it out. Okay.
Absolutely, and I think, and just to that point too, I think one thing that's really important that we don't talk about a lot is the optimization, right? And trying to get that continual buy-in to keep your program going. And if you're not able to show which pieces of content are performing and where they fit into the funnel, it's really difficult to convince your management to give you more money.
Well, and the other side of the equation is not every piece of content is equal in terms of how much effort went in to create it, and that's sometimes what we forget because we're not time tracking writers and things like that. But it's very important to be able to understand the amount of money, the amount of effort that went into creating content, and then looking at the results. Because you may find a blog post drove way more results than that ebook that took you 6 weeks to create, and so that's where the cost savings and the efficiency and all of that stuff come in. All right.
Absolutely.
So we are going to follow up with an email. Everyone's going to have this recording if you want to share it. We've got the Buyer Persona webinar March 2nd with Adele, which is going to be fantastic. We're going to send out some templates, some blog posts and things that we talked about and showed today. And then, of course, if you are interested in trying out a platform that can do the things we talked about today, Mintent has a trial, free trial. You can go on our website, sign up. You don't have to make any kind of commitments or anything. You can play around with it and see if that is going to work for you or not. And we'd be happy to give demos and all kinds of things to help you figure out whether this is something that's interesting for you. So with that, let's take some questions. There's so many good ones.
Yeah, there's some great ones.
I
they're
we'll
exciting.
get to them all, but we'll respond to.
Let's try.
But let's try. Selma, you want to?
Yes.
Help
All
us with the
right.
questions.
Well, yes, I would love to. We have some fantastic questions, as you just mentioned. So I'll start with Jennifer's question. She's curious to know what is usually considered in scope for a content strategy. Specifically, would you include media relations activity?
Yeah, well, my answer is everything. I'm just going to say everything that you're producing, content-wise, your shows, your PR, anything really that people have to work on collaboratively. Anything that creates an experience for your customer, builds your brand. So there's really no walls to it. But Kelly, you may have some more fine-tuning on that.
I think so. I think with a content strategy, I think that we try to build. So when I'm working with teams, we try to build those content pillars. So what does our content strategy consist of? So we try to make buckets. And someone who's really great on buckets and how to kind of categorize content. Well, too, Andy again at Orbit Media, great content on Content Marketing Institute, but also Matt Collier. He writes a lot about content and blogging and how to get your content in the right buckets. So we kind of think of them as buckets, or I call them pillars. And you can usually fit all different types of forms and themes. Your content has to relate to one of these. So I think it all is in scope as long as it relates to something strategic and ladders up to that overarching mission.
Yeah, and I think the other important point, though, is and it's related to some other questions, is you don't have to boil the ocean either. Like people, well, can I just put a strategy together for my department or my I'm the social team, or I'm the web team, or I'm the yeah, absolutely. Even if you don't have to get every single activity in your organization that has anything to do with content in the platform all at once.
No.
I certainly don't recommend that at all unless you're a very tiny company. But you could certainly start in pieces and then add to it.
Absolutely, and as an example, when I worked at Paperly, and I was the only non-technical person there, so I ran content, communications, community, customer care. I was an accidental content marketer. I started using content not to market, but to be helpful, to help our end users through the customer care, through the support center. And that content ended up being, it was always more, what are the benefits you get out of it, instead of just help articles. So our strategy started in customer care. That's not at all where people usually think of their content strategy starting. So I think it depends on the organization. And sometimes you have a hard time getting buy-in. Try a pilot. Put something together and try a pilot if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Right. Wonderful. So to follow up with that, we have a question about if an organization has multiple content, which you two have addressed, are you suggesting having different content missions per content? And there is a worry from this participant, wouldn't that detract from an organization's fundamental driving mission to some degree?
Mm-hmm. So I think with the content mission, again, it's you want your website. So maybe a brand has many different websites. If I think of Autodesk or Intel or Adobe, gosh, they have just so many different blogs and so much different content. But ultimately, they want their content. They're addressing a certain audience, and they want their website to be the place where these people find this type of content. And I think that every division might have its own take, their own tilt on content they need to deliver, but the overarching kind of this landing pad where people come to, that you want to help people in a specific area. So I think the content mission, it's a little bit higher up, and you might have very specific, regarding a funnel or your journey, very specific pieces of content that address challenges or help people with education or benefits, but it ladders up to that overarching mission.
Yeah,
and then there is no conflict there.
Yeah, I think that's the important point is you can splinter it, but you want to make sure it all supports the layer above. So I think it's good, start with your company's core values and mission statement, purpose, all that stuff, and have that front and center when you're creating, and then it's like, well, what do we do? How do we support that? and what are the different, what's our content mission? How does it roll up to that? And then you get into your, your themes and your campaigns, and then the individual pieces of content. But it should all slow down, like from a, kind of a hierarchy perspective.
All right, wonderful. So we only have a little bit of time left, so we'll try to get through some more. We have Melissa, and she has a specific question based on your slide 23. And so the question is, the slide refers to process to web-based plans. And do you recommend sharing this plan with other departments outside of marketing? So in the past, using Excel, we can tie permissions in so the material can't be edited by the wrong groups. And she's wondering, should we change this mindset to be more transparent and truly share the plan?
Gosh, I think that's such a great question. I think, I would say sharing is caring. It sounds corny. Share. I think you're right. Lock it down if you don't want people to be able to edit anything because you don't want to lose data. But I think being able to share and show what you're doing, and again, it goes into that wider stakeholder buy-in and getting support for your program, absolutely let people know what you're doing. We share. I encourage teams to share the plans with, obviously, sales. Sales is very tightly coupled into the content marketing process, or the customer service team, the product development team, and they're very tightly coupled in. They need to know what's happening if they're working on any upcoming new products or product launches. So the more people who understand what's happening, the better. I think it can only benefit. Absolutely.
Yeah, and but the thing is, the reason that it doesn't get shared, because I agree, the more transparency, people know what's coming, salespeople know what marketing's doing, they see what's coming down the pipe. I think the reason people don't share is because when you're doing this in, say, a spreadsheet, it's kind of binary. You either share the spreadsheet or you don't. If you share the spreadsheet, that person sees everything. And that can be a problem because you also have privacy and confidentiality and things like that have to be addressed. And that's why if you move to a platform, the people in the system have roles and restrictions. So you can control who sees what. And so, you might share the general calendar with the whole company and have people that just come in and view it. And then other people that are, you certainly want to restrict who can approve things and who can edit things and that. So you really that's the benefit of a platform versus a spreadsheet, is you can give people roles and then permissions of what they can do in that role. And that, once you do that, you can share.
All right, great. I appreciate both of your detailed responses. We have Mandy here, and she's asking for tips on how to deal with identifying content purpose with nonprofit organizations. So in her organization, their purpose is to serve their members, but they also have products and services for sale. So sometimes these purposes seem contradictory to each other.
I'll take a stab at that, and then Kelly, I know you'll comment on this too. I did a webcast last week for a healthcare organization, or like a marketing group within healthcare, and we have a lot of healthcare clients, and this comes up, right? Because obviously healthcare, well, depending where you live in the world, healthcare is a for-profit thing, and but at the same time, you have people that are very potentially emotional and vulnerable, and there's a lot of other issues, right, besides just trying to sell something. And that's where I think understanding your persona and having a buyer journey, that's really about empathy, because it's about understanding what the person needs. And it goes back to, people don't want to be sold to, they want information about things they care about. And if you provide them with that information, and it just happens to be that you are also selling something that can help them at that time, then I don't think there's a conflict. I think the best marketing is the most empathetic marketing. So that's my perspective on that.
I think that's great. I second that.
All right.
I'm all hands in the air on that one.
Okay. 2 thumbs up.
All right. That's great. We have a question from Denise. And she's curious of how is your billing platform set? So is it by amount of content, number of users, etc.? If you can kind of give us some more detail about that.
Yeah, so sorry, can you just repeat the very beginning of the question?
Yes. Denise wants to know, how is your billing platform set? So by amount of content, number of users, etc.
Yeah, I'm not totally clear on the billing platform part. So I don't know, Kelly. Do you think that's maybe an agent?
I think maybe she just means subscription. Like how much do you cost? Is that it?
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, if that's the case, yeah.
Don't overthink it, Matt.
Sorry. How much do we charge for our products? Yeah, so our it's basically starts on a per user basis, and it's on average about $100 per user per month. However, like we talked about before, there are different roles and different permissions. So if you wanted people to just be able to see a calendar and have access to that, then that would be a lot less expensive. So that's obviously a very broad general answer. But these systems don't have to cost a lot of money. For a few $100s a month, you can be up on a platform like this for a small team, and then you just kind of scale it up as you need to.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, fantastic. We have run out of time for today, unfortunately, but I want to thank Kelly and Matt. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your expertise and a wonderful webcast. I want to also thank ReadyTalk for providing us with our web conferencing platform for today's webcast. And I want to let our audience know, just to remind them, that this webcast will be archived later on this afternoon. So please feel free to visit AMA/webcast for more information if you want to revisit these great points, take more notes. We also will have follow-up communication with the recording and great additional resources. Any questions that we didn't get to, the Mintent team will also follow up and provide more clarification. So no worries there if we didn't have a chance to answer your question. But thank you so much to our audience for these wonderful questions, for your participation, your time. We will have a short survey at the end of this presentation, and we would really appreciate your feedback. Just let us know what you thought about today's webcast and also what topics you're interested in seeing on future webcasts. So this does end our presentation for today. Thank you so much again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.